Thank you so much, James. I'm excited to be here. Greetings, everyone, and welcome. I am going to start today because we have a bit of a packed agenda, and I want to ensure that you have the opportunity to speak and share some of your thoughts during each section. So again, I'm Kwayera, and I'm the CVO of Global Archer, and really work to ensure that everyone who works with us not only becomes amazing at what they're doing with their work, but that their personal lives are very much in balance as well, and using prioritization skill sets. So today we're going to start with visionary and transformational leadership, and it's really focused around managing aspects of the leadership process. So as you can see here, in exploring the difference between leadership and management, we often have learned that there is a difference, right? So with management, you're managing things, and with leadership, you're inspiring, hopefully, people. And inspiring people usually and typically are visionary, and they have the ability to really reflect and develop and refine specific traits within themselves. And that takes a lot of extra work outside of the office and outside of your family. It's that time that we sometimes don't even believe that we have, but we have to find it. And so that's what today's session will be about and incorporate in. So we'll share strategies that can build upon and improve your leadership processes through 4 specific areas. There are more, but today we're only going to focus on 4, and they are observation, in the first part, reflection, managing change and problem-solving techniques, and the last part, which holds up all of the other parts, is our personal sustainability and ability to reboot. Excuse the language, but it's the times that we're living in, right? How do you completely, or use another word like replenish, refresh, rejuvenate, rebuild, or we're using today reboot, right? So we're going to take about 15 minutes on each section, and then have about 5 or 6 minutes for discussion, or a little bit more after each section. We're going to begin each section, each part, with a group of questions. And so I'm going to ask you and give you a couple of minutes to take out a piece of paper or a tablet or a phone that you can type and write on and answer these questions. We're going to take a couple of minutes. Typically, you have questions at the end of a section, but I'm doing it a little differently today because I want you to take inventory from a very objective place, and that is modeling what I am very much interested in you taking from this session into your leadership roles. So I'd like you to begin to jot down some answers here. And you can share at the end if you so choose. So what is observation for you? Right? Why do we observe? Honestly, you know, so we initially say, we observe to make things better. But why are we currently observing today when we walk around in our leadership roles? And I know some of us are managers and leaders. Wherever you're leading from, whether it's entry level, mid-level, or executive level, or board level, which is also executive level, I want you to think about leadership from wherever you're leading, right? And when I use the word honestly, it's not to catch you in not telling the truth. It's to be able to take a step back and say, why do I run around or go here or go there to see? Is it a requirement? Am I required to just document it? Or am I really interested in sitting and just, or not even interested, but am I able to have the time and the space to sit and just take in what I'm seeing? The next question is, how do you observe? Just a couple of quick words you can put down. What is its place in the leadership process? What does observation have to do with leading? What is its importance When do we observe? Who do we observe? And with whom do we observe? Or whom is it best to observe with? So I'm just going to give you another couple of seconds because I find it really important to be able to take this time to reflect on these questions. So I'll take just some more seconds. Okay. And keep your notes highlighted with the section number 1, observation, so that at the end you'll know if you want to go way back to the beginning, you can cite it. But at the end of this section, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and share as well. So now we're going to get into my take on observation. As we know, there are several different types of observation, right? There's controlled observation, there's which is not in its natural state, but we're going to focus on natural observation. And that's when you're somewhat like a participant in the observation process. Natural observation is the action or process of carefully watching someone or something. And the major benefit to that is you see things as they're happening in the moment, in real time. Things aren't changed. They're not set up for you. You just go as a non-threatening participant. Let me say that again, as a non-threatening participant, because oftentimes when leaders show up, we begin, the environments can change. And so we have to really think about how to best show up as a participant, right? And participatory observation is still being able to sit and not impact the environment. The major challenge is our confirmation bias, and time is the minor challenge, but the major challenge is our leadership bias, right? And I'll go into what that means a little bit. So we go in and we think we're being really open, but we have so much to do. We already have a lot of preconceived notions, and it can be pretty challenging to rid ourselves of those. And the solution is to identify and correct our errors and gaps in our thinking, so that when we're really observing, we're not coming with all of our preconceived notions, right? And so what each section will have is my recommendation for us to think a little deeper in practice areas, right? What we can take away from each section. It's more of our knowledge, skills, and really looking and changing and hopefully transforming our mindset. So recognizing confirmation bias is being inclined to seek out information that supports our own preconceived beliefs, as I just said. It typically leads us in a direction that we've already assumed to be true or based on our existing knowledge and experience. So what happens if a leader doesn't have that existing knowledge and experience? They have to be somewhat authentic and do the work, as I call it, to truly go in objectively without the bias, right? Alternatively, learning comes from this process, and it comes from identifying and correcting those gaps in our thinking. Effectively learning by doing. A part of the doing is actually just going, sitting, and taking in. It's not as passive as we may think. Not just reviewing things and numbers and reports. That's not the level of observation that we're talking about. And the big piece is being able, the practice area is allocating regular time in your schedule to go out and see things for yourself, experience them in person where they happen at the value adding team member level. And that's the other piece, to not come in as a threatening leader as society has sometimes imposed, and even in many of your organizations, I'm sure you fight that to have an inclusive, collective environment. But it's important for those that you're observing, for the benefit of the whole, is to really understand that you're coming to understand their processes as the value-adding team, right? Because typically, we don't get that, right? We don't get that affirmation and confirmation. And I think another piece that I'll add right here that I'd like you to take throughout, which you won't see on the screen, is appreciative inquiry. I talk about that really all the time. Appreciative inquiry is really looking at things that aren't not only not working, but looking first at what is working and sharing that with your team and giving them the confidence and actually really building up our sense of self-worth so that there is confidence and courage to look at what isn't always working or where there are gaps. In order to go into this process of objective observation, we need a sense of emotional intelligence, right? And that's something we have to do independent and individual for ourselves. And we're not going to look at the right side of the screen right now with the social piece. We're really going to look at the self, the ability to recognize and understand our moods, emotions, our drives, as well as their effect on others. So even how we enter a room to observe or an environment, how we are coming with our energy, I'll use that word, or mood, and how it affects everyone, and does it change the environment, and actually does it affect and change and alter what you're there to observe, thereby not really helping you get the information you need to create the outcome you want with the team. And then that part is really looking at who you are and being able to adjust that in a way that creates development and transformation for yourself. And then the self-management, we can interpret this in different ways, right? The ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses and moods, and to be able to suspend that judgment, to think before acting. And that's actually what observation gives us the ability to do. And that's really important. Visionary leaders bring a mindset of curiosity rather than judgment. Leadership requires we recognize within ourselves that we don't know what we don't know, and what we don't know, we should know. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to stop here for a minute and ask you if there are any questions. James, if we could open up this section for any questions or comments, or if you could share with each other, that would be helpful.
Sure, folks, you can feel free to unmute yourselves or type into the chat if you have any questions or comments.
See. And if not, let's see if I can more. Okay. Ooh. Well, are you seeing anything, or should I go on?
I don't see anything right now, Kwayera. I think you can.
Okay, awesome. So I think you can see that on my screen, can't you? No?
Yes.
Okay. So the next section that we're going to look at is reflection. And as I said, we have a couple of different sections that we're building to. So it's observation and then reflection. So when you observe, you have information that you can go away and sit with. And that's where reflection comes in, right? Reflection is concerned with consciously looking at and thinking about our experience, actions, feelings, responses, and then interpreting or analyzing them in order to learn from. So I'm going to go to a screen where I want you to answer these questions, right? I just gave you the research definition of what reflection is. But if we can answer for ourselves on a piece of paper, like, what is reflection, right? Why do we reflect? So what we're doing now is just writing down the questions at the top, each for the newcomers, at the top of each of our parts and sections, we're going to answer a few questions from where we sit today, right? What is its place in the leadership process, the reflection? And what is its importance? When do we reflect, and whom do we reflect with, right? So I know oftentimes when I was running the organization, a leadership position, it was really challenging for me to find the quiet space and time to reflect. Either I was going to take it away from my me time, I was going to take it away from my staff time, my observation time, my family time, my fun time, whatever it was, I had to ensure that I was carving it in. And so when you are looking at this and writing down, please, it's so important to just write down a couple of words. That would be really helpful for you in the future. So now we go back to this slide, really talking about the major benefit of reflection. When we reflect, we consider deeply something that we might not otherwise have given thought. The major challenge, as I just shared, is regularly allocating time and the discipline to reflect. And the solution, consistently reflect upon how your team, this is very important, experiences your leadership style. As you reflect each morning, start asking these questions of yourself, which we will get to in a minute. But I really want to go over the solution. If we consistently reflect on how our team experiences our leadership style, it allows us to come out of our bubble, right? I know 360s help with that. Myers-Briggs can help a bit with that. All of those personality structures, and also the ability for staff to give feedback anonymously, or your team or your volunteers, or even, believe it or not, those that you're serving. I think that's very important. Those that you're in business to provide service to. Having them give you feedback about your leadership style is very important. And I would say not once a year for the annual review, but literally working in every month, or even in some kind of programmatic way where you are accessible and available for that kind of feedback, so that you can have the time to go away and reflect on it, right? So reflecting, I'm so sorry, I did not mean to take you there yet. I'm having a little problem here. Reflecting on your work and your leadership style in this manner makes your personal beliefs, expectations, and biases more evident to you. And I just want you to take a minute and look at this screen, right? And I'm going to, and reading at the top of the screen while you're looking. So I'm asking you to do two things at once, right? Which is what most leaders have to do. And then you move on to the next screen, to the next, staff member, to the next task, to the next review, to the next meeting. How do you see everything, as we said earlier, that you didn't know, that you need to know, and in a limited amount of time? So we said reflection. How do you create practice and skill set areas to build up or stock up that area, so you really begin to gain strength and become and refine that skill set within yourself, right? And the community that you're leading. So the first thing is creating a learning environment. Learn from mistakes. Listen to what's being said. Being able to become a good listener is essential. So when we say learn from mistakes, we go back to what I said a couple of slides ago, and that is appreciative inquiry. So even if there is a mistake, even if something dropped, or there's a major gap, you as a leader have the opportunity to be able to create a learning out of that, right? And not necessarily harp or lean on it as a mistake. And so leaders have that ability to shape culture. Do people come to meetings and feel like, oh my God, I made a mistake, and they're downtrodden and heavy? Or is it an opportunity to say, wow, we learned something we didn't know, and it becomes an exciting moment? And that's something that a learning environment can foster. Taking ownership. Take responsibility for actions, thoughts, and the reality that exists in an environment that you have major impact on, and that you are actually the one leading, let's say, right? So if we take responsibility for our actions, it begins to model for others that it's not a bad thing to take responsibility. If someone in my leadership position, emailed me, I didn't have time to get to it, I don't want them to think that they're not important, right? I have to say, sometimes, believe it or not, openly, right, if I want to create that transparency, I kind of messed up and I didn't do it. I was, apologize, and these are the things I'm going to do differently. Leaders believe sometimes that they don't have to do that because it lessens their strength in the environment. But what it actually does is it empowers your strength. There was a major funder that we had at the organization I used to run. It was our largest funder. And my mode of operation with them was always taking ownership and being honest for all of the actions. And believe it or not, the more I continued to take ownership for things that dropped and came, here's the other part, and came back with solutions of how I would remedy it. You can't just say, yeah, I messed up, right? You have to actually be able to take that time to reflect and then be able to construct some kind of solution. Every time I came back with what you might call, or others might call, a mistake, we got an increase in funding. I can't say to go and do that all the time, but that's the phenomenon that existed. People want to know they're working with honest people who are accountable, right? The next practice area is keeping our commitments. So that's connected to my story about going to those funders and saying, we kind of dropped this didn't work, I kept the commitment to still deliver in other areas, going back to appreciative inquiry, right? So this is what went really well that we expected, and this is what went really well that we didn't even expect, and we kept our commitment, but this is what fell, and this is how we're fixing it. So in that, with our funders, we did one thing. With the team, and those you're leading and those you're serving, you make dreams happen for each person and the entire company. So you really begin to reflect on a deeper level. So did we say, when you come work with us, you'll have access to this and that, or you'll be able to grow in this area, you'll have this kind of training. Were we able to do it? And if we weren't able to do it, did we communicate that in a rapid response rate? Did we take ownership? And did we create and ensure we have a culture that's a learning environment, right? Each of these build up on top of the other. To be able to reflect, we also have to have a strong sense of presence. Make the most of every minute. As a leader, if we're sitting in a meeting, and I know we all know this, I know we know it's best practice, but it rings volumes if you pick up a phone and start looking at messages. I understand it's the culture we live in, but we have to begin to set a different trend so our organizations and communities really raise the bar for what we value. We value the person we're sitting in front of, the person we're talking to. So we have to figure out how to be extremely present. Always speak with good purpose. Speak honestly, but kindly. The other thing about reflection is after we reflect, we go back with information sometimes that is not necessarily fully honest and or not kind, right? Having compassion is very important, not just for yourself, but others, particularly in the reflection process. So if you're saying, oh man, this dropped, you have to have compassion on yourself as well as those you're serving. And I really believe the harder that we are on ourselves, we tend to just project that on those that work with us. And not saying we shouldn't meet for, we shouldn't reach for high standards. Let's not use high, low, but we shouldn't reach for goals that are leaps. We should, but we have to be compassionate in the process. Upholding integrity. match our behavior and behaviors of others with values. So are we communicating the values of the organization clearly? Are we clear about our own values? And do we give our team members the opportunity to communicate, share, and express their values so we understand where there's alignment and misalignment? So sometimes if someone's holding up a value, it might not, it's their personal value that we never even understood or gave room for. And so in the reflection process, we can understand where there's a disconnect or a stronger connect. And that leads me to staying connected, right? So the way we get to find these things out is if we're connected. We ensure that the community is unbroken and valuing each and every person. And that's when you have a sense of presence, you really, and everyone begins to feel that they are a part of the community and they're present, and it's not disconnected, it's connected. Visionary leaders connect with their strengths, purpose, and values. And the biggest part about that is understanding that our values, right, they are our core values. It defines not just culture for the company, but it also defines in the organization your personal culture and your life. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny, by Mahatma Gandhi, right? He clearly articulated for me one of the clearest definitions of values. And you could take a minute to look at how reflecting ties into this, right? Our beliefs become our thoughts. When we're reflecting, we're actually thinking. And after we reflect, we come back and share, right? So our beliefs, we have to be careful of leader confirmation bias, because sometimes our beliefs haven't really been based on our values, and our beliefs completely dictate our thoughts. And so we're observing, but we're not observing objectively or based on our values. And so it can skew positively or negatively what we're there to do in the observation process. So now I would like feedback. I showed this reflection before. I want people to tell me what they saw before and what they see now, that I'm showing it to you again, that I'm drawing your attention into this picture. And I'd like several people to just share what they see, what they saw before, and if you saw it before, are you seeing something different now?
Kwayera, we had a comment come in through the chat that someone sees a dancer and they saw that both times.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Again, another dancer.
Okay.
Feel free to unmute yourselves, folks, and chime in.
Hi, my name is Alicia, and I think the thing that I'm seeing a little bit differently is the first time I looked at it, it looked like the same, like it was a mirror. And then the second time, it was a different image on the bottom. So it felt like it was a shift in perspective, as opposed to just assuming it's just the same thing.
Right. Awesome. I can't really see people, so I'm just going to jump in on this. It's when you see it large, it's a splash of water, right? It's literally, and it's like, what is really interesting is some people sometimes see a body the second time. They see a dancer reflected on the bottom. They see a dress on the bottom. They see a dancer on the shoulder or the hand. They see so many things. And so thank you for sharing that. The reason why I go back to this slide is just to illustrate how when you take time to draw in. Now, some of us or in the super, super, super advanced class, I have to say I looked at this several times and used it in presentations, and I did not see all of that, right? And I'm confessing that I did not see all the things that I have seen now over a couple of years. And having that space and time to really reflect and just take time and slow down is essential, because as leaders, it gives us the tools we need to be able to move to the next level. Does anybody else want to say what they've seen, or shall I go on?
Kwayera, we had one really interesting comment, and a gentleman said he saw water, then a samurai.
Huh. So the water one is really common. People see water at first, but a samurai, that's very unique. That's very, very unique. And I would like to ask if he saw that. Oh, he saw water first time and samurai the second time. Is there anyone else? Or I will. Okay. Okay, here we go. I'm going to move on and to the next section of managing change, right? So now we're going to write again the details of these questions. I'm going to ask you to give a little bit more than words this time. I'm going to allocate a couple of minutes. Are you leading from a position of control or improvement? I need you to please write a sentence about this. And I'll probably give like 20 seconds for each question. Okay. Do employees give everything they have or something less in the work environment? And how and why do you contribute to that behavior? Right? So if they're giving everything, we could see how we can contribute. If they're giving something less, let's also take a moment to reflect how we're contributing to that and why. Right? And if you don't contribute to it at all, why? Right? What's the block? Because we should be contributing to the environment in which we're leading, because we inspire as leaders. That's our role, to inspire collaboration, to inspire direction, to inspire, reaching goals, to inspire and motivate. We're supposed to be inspirational. But in order to do that, there are a couple of things that need to be in place, but we want to first just see, how are we managing this change? Is your leadership style a coaching or a telling, a yelling or doing, empathetic or disruptive? Now, this is all very personal. Don't beat up on yourselves too much, but I know when we're high stress, sometimes we could be very disruptive, right? We have things that are coming down the pipeline and whatever. I'm not even going to give it a definition, right? It's coming down the pipeline and we need to get to so-and-so and they need to do it, and they're in the middle of a project. And at that moment, we are actually being disruptive, right? We could call it whatever we want. It's a disruptive action. How do we figure that out in our leadership style, right? How do we potentially include folks more in the process so that we're not the ones always just coming down the pipeline and being disruptive? When are we empathetic? Is it too much? Is it appropriate? And to be honest, how are we coaching or telling, right? There's a difference to coach versus tell. And then there's the modeling with doing, and the very, very few people who do the yelling. But it happens, you know. I have a lot of, and this is a safe space. We're not going to ask you to share if you have been a yeller, but I know that's not the best practice at all, and we don't even like to admit it, but that's the whole point of reflection, right? What behavior needs to completely remove itself from the leadership process, your personal leadership process, and not to be phony. I often say this, not to be phony and put on, but how do you actually ensure that people are participating in your authenticity? They understand it. And are failures tools for organizational learning and improving people, or tools that destroy both, right? When we looked at failures or mistakes, they can be learnings for the entire organization and improving not just the tools that you use, but also improving folks' performance. Okay, so managing change and problem-solving techniques. Problem-solving shouldn't be boring. In fact, we should make it extremely enjoyable so that people feel they are able to really come and share what's not working with their leaders. That is essential. These ideas can help any company transform good managers into great leaders. And that point, I want to stay on for a minute. Oftentimes, we don't realize that when we are problem solving, we identify those rock star managers, and that can be an opportunity to really start cultivating and modeling for them the leadership trajectory, right? The major challenge is we're too busy to do it right the first time, but we often seem to have plenty of time to do it over again to fix. So in terms of problem solving, a lot of times we can get at the front of that. And oftentimes the folks on the ground, what we call the value-adding team members, have solutions, but they seem too time-consuming, not burdensome, but time-consuming for our timeline. And that really creates a serious bottleneck for us in the future because we have to do it all over again. And the solution is to develop a nimble, trained problem-solving team or teams. When creating problem-solving teams, you empower groups to take initiative and participate in the organization's direction, creating access and opportunity. What is essential here is people, and the word problem is capitalized, not to focus on negativity, but to say it's a problem-solving team or teams that you create, and it empowers everyone to really begin taking initiative in the process. This is where change management really happens. So the first part was observing. Second part was really moving into reflection. Now you're moving outside of yourself with action, right? The first two is really observing, just looking. Second part, going very much internal. This part is where your behaviors become really profound and begin to shape not just what you saw, but what you thought about what you saw, and now how you're going to go out and manage the process. They must be specifically trained, these teams, in problem solving through root cause analysis. So there could be a problem. If you create these teams, how are they able to look at the root causes of these problems, not just, okay, this didn't happen, but how did it happen? That training needs to happen. And it's different for each and every organization. And I really need to say that because every organization is different. And sometimes we come up with these models that say we should do it this way. And we can't, because every culture is different and every group has different skill sets and norms. And so going to the root cause and the analysis to get to the root cause is extremely customized for every organization. And the other thing that we need to do is take the time to coach and spread similar thinking throughout our leadership team and the entire organization. If we're able to do that, I think we're able to really begin to create the kind of change we're looking to during this process. Maya Angelou said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. That is important as a change manager / leader, right? So let me clarify that a bit. We're talking to leaders here today, managing the change process. Now we're going to get into some very specific areas of practice, right? And I want to take an opportunity after this slide to really chat with folks a bit and get your take on it. So managing change, some of our innovative solutions is not being too hands-off, right? That is essential. These areas are kind of proven to be strong practice areas for managing change in organization. Providing feedback. I think one of the biggest gaps is that we delegate, we give information, we have meetings, we forget or don't create the time to go to the appropriate individuals and not just say good job, but actually give feedback beyond the 360, actually give feedback beyond the annual review, actually give feedback beyond a monthly meeting. How do we identify who those individuals are that need consistent feedback and are willing to, you're willing, right, to take the time? I know for me, providing feedback was one of the most difficult things, not because I didn't have feedback, but because I was so busy at the time. And what I had to do was really ensure that I identified who needed the feedback and that they had teams that they too would model giving feedback, because it was just virtually impossible to give feedback to everyone, but yet and still align yourself with a culture of being accessible. Because sometimes someone wants to give you feedback, but if you're not accessible, they can't, right? So making time for your team, which builds into them being able to give you feedback, really ensuring that you're available, accessible, and visible, right? Some people I know, they actually create a schedule and they say, I am going to, through the week, be available and visible and make time for each and every team throughout the organization. So they see me at least once or twice a week. And it goes into your schedule, right? Understanding boundaries. Sometimes we're trying to be so close and friends with folks that we don't create boundaries for ourselves and our own well-being or our management and leadership style or goals, forget style, our leadership goals, and also for our self-care. People begin calling us at night, they call us on the weekends, which is okay if that's the culture of your organization, but is it okay for everyone? Is it sustainable for everyone? And we'll get into that a little later. Begin as a leader to create the boundaries, right? Because what we said earlier is that we always have to go back and fix it anyway. So if we create the space from the gate, we're able to probably save time and energy and a lot of morale in the end, because we don't have to go and repeat everything. So creating boundaries is essential, right? if you're the leader, maybe you're ensuring that people live holistic lives in your organization. Maybe, you know, that they're incorporating artistic time. Do you, for your recipients of your service, are you all as leaders, right? Are we really incorporating any of that into our lives? Are we creating, for example, time where we can do our art, if that is something we think everyone should participate in, right? So that's really important, being able to create those boundaries, not just for yourself, but respecting them with others on the team. Defining collective goals. What often happens is in change, a lot of times we say people are failing. They just aren't doing everything we've asked them to do. And we just sometimes haven't really taken the time to really refine and define collective goals. So we might have a goal, A, we might not have communicated it clearly, but B, there may be other goals that need to be incorporated into our goal. Remember, on the ground, the value added team members, they're the ones closest to what's really going on. They're the ones that knows what's happening. And as leaders, we have to provide access and respect for those opportunities so that they can give it back to us, right? So that it can be incorporated into our goal setting. Understanding motivation. This is a whole section in and of itself, as I decided to do a list and not go through each and every slide around goal setting and motivation, because I really want it to be a reflective process. Motivating your team members comes from a place of authenticity, right? We have to have that kind of balance in our own life for us to be able to have the energy and vibrancy to motivate others. You can't motivate from a false place, right? Which takes us to our last area, which we're going to spend a good amount of time on and hopefully talking about. That's the area we'll spend the most time on, which is self-preservation and rebooting. This motivation piece ties directly into that. Understanding our role as leaders is the next section, right? Our role. What is your role as a leader? We all probably have different definitions for that. I know for many, the role of a leader is not to manage day-to-day operations, but what if you're in a 2, 3, 4 person organization, or what if you're in a subsidiary of a university and you have a program in that company? It's very different, and you have to understand the role and make sure you agree with it. And if you don't, hopefully you have access, right, to be able to provide feedback to people, because it's not just about your role today, it's about the organization. As a leader, is it really working? We don't want to create habits that are just broken and people are developing workarounds that as leaders we never have access to see, know, and understand so that it can be incorporated into the process. And thoughtful recruitment. One of the biggest pieces of leaders is we kind of, if we're rushing, we rubber stamp, right? Recruitment. And we might just not take the time, and then we end up having this revolving door. A lot of us work with artists, and it's very hard to hold on to artists, because a lot of times the next job comes up, or it's paying more, or they have a tour, or so how do we create a recruitment system that's extremely thoughtful? For some arts organizations, I know they have created an incentive ladder, right? Where in the recruitment process, they have a strategy where they say, for year 1, this is what we offer. After a review and incorporating into the community and, you know, really continuing to develop, this is what we offer for year 2. Year 3, this is, and so the recruitment is just not about who you're recruiting, but also what you're offering to them to recruit those that are committed, that buy into your mission, vision, and philosophy. And that's one very strong way you're able to manage change. You want to bring on people that are really committed to your values and your mission, but if it's not articulated clearly and thoughtfully in the recruitment process, you're not going to always attract the people who are looking to build a career or relationship with you. The other piece about managing change is walking the walk, right? It's ensuring that we are doing what we say we want everyone else to do. And that is essential. That's the part about integrity, authenticity, you know, really being somewhat transparent as a leader and still understanding your boundaries and what's your private life. But walking the walk as a leader, people are looking at you, they're trying to get motivation from you, and they're definitely being inspired and hopefully for the benefit of the whole. And the last piece in this practice area is delegating and not dictating. What does delegating mean, right? So that's something I want us to talk about a little more at the end of this section. If anyone has a thought, please share it. Delegating is, first of all, being able to identify who actually has the ability in the group to take on the task and ensuring that you have confidence in them to be able to do the work, right? And not micromanaging. So it's, people often say, I might as well do it myself, or I have to micromanage, or you're micromanaging me. Well, oftentimes the work comes before you give the task. Really having evidence-based reason why you're going to delegate to that person. And delegating means also providing a lot of information and defining collective goals, being very clear about step A, B, and C. As a leader, you're not managing the day-to-day work, you are inspiring people. So in that process, you have to be inspiring. Make the problem-solving skill fun, an incentive for showing up to work and doing a good job in terms of managing the process. The other thing is catch them when they're good. All too often, as leaders, sometimes we tell other leaders on our team, or just the folks who we're supposed to be inspiring, that what they messed up on. Goes back to appreciative inquiry again. Catch them when they're good. You'll get more out of it oftentimes. And transformational leaders are willing to experiment with new behaviors and take action that oftentimes come from the team. And there's a level of flexibility. So I'm going to ask if we could have any reflection before I go into the last part of really looking at self-care and rebooting.
Again, folks, feel free to unmute yourselves and share your thoughts or reflections around the material that Kwayera just presented. You can also use the chat box.
Okay, so I just want to give space in case anyone thinks of anything. Okay.
Sure, something came in through the chat from Frank. I like the idea of collective goals. Often it's become top down and it ruins morale.
Exactly, and that's from Frank?
Yep.
Yeah, Frank, and everyone, that is a big piece of the top down. There are different types of collective goal setting, right? There's, you know, some people call it flat leadership. Some people call it horizontal, collaborative. And a lot of times it's kind of knocked right out of the park because it takes so much time. And some people tend to think it's not efficient, but yet they understand it's effective. And so the piece about that I really want to remind everyone is whether it is horizontal, collaborative, creating access, or collective goal setting, you have to go in with the mindset that you have to allocate time. So what are we willing to give up to be able to incorporate this as leaders, right? We are the ones that actually set the inspiration to develop culture a lot of times. And a lot of times people don't like to embrace that because they're like, that's too much weight on me. But people want to follow folks who are inspirational, be motivated by people who are healthy, who are authentic, who are reflective. And then they start hopefully modeling that same behavior. And it doesn't have to be the person who is the ED. We can lead from wherever we are, and that goes back to the collaborative goal setting. However, if there are executives on this call, or you have access to executives, they are the ones that ultimately, right, can change culture with the board to say, what are we going to give up? What are we going to be able to prioritize to ensure that we're now allocating this time that is going to be beneficial and effective? Okay? So if that's the only comment, James,
Actually, a few more have come in, Kwayera.
Okay.
One that I'd love to drop on you if we have time.
Oh, we do.
Speak more to root cause analysis, since most of us are working to solve problems.
Oh, absolutely. So root cause analysis, for me, it comes from the perspective of really getting to the root, obviously, but ensuring that we're sitting with those that have their hand on the pulse of what's really happening. So I have seen it most effectively, and I'm not using literature research right now. I'm using practical experiences that I have seen in the field where you're able to use reflective learning processes. You go and you sit with those that had their hands in the what we might call the issue, the challenge, the problem, right? We are able to spend literally a half a day in some type of retreat in our format, meaning however your organization handles successful communication in your style, in your culture, that is where root cause analysis begins. You sit down. Some people have dinners, literally, to be able to create an environment where everyone can give feedback in a non-threatening environment and share what went wrong. A lot of times in root cause analysis, leaders are able to find out what a team would have done had they not been laden with burdensome systems. They often have workarounds, and root analysis helps you to find out what is causing the problem, because of oftentimes what I've seen in the field, there are so many burdensome systems that everyone is mandated to use, whether for funding, whether it's historical, whether it's legacy, whatever it is, that they cannot get their jobs done. They just can't get it done. And so that is oftentimes how you can get to a strong analysis and to the root. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Kwayera.
Okay.
A few more questions came in, but I'm going to hold those until the end.
Okay.
Because we're starting to run short on time.
Okay, awesome. So we're rolling into the fourth section, and this is the last section, and I think the most important. I love this section. I love it because without you, there is no leader in that capacity. They'll just get another leader. So how do you personally sustain yourself and reboot. So I'm going to ask you to reflect on these very personal questions that you do not need to share with me or anyone else, but they are very important, right? Because leaders are inspiring with their whole self, right? If your energy is off, if your mood is off, you are going to be felt. And so more so than anybody else, leaders have to look at the whole self, right? So the first question is, what's missing in your life? And I ask this question oftentimes because people feel it. They see it. It shows up in your leadership process, believe it or not. You don't have to say it. They feel it, right? Because a lot of leadership is not by what you say, it's what you're doing and how you're doing it. Does your family feel your present state? Family and or friends, right? Whatever it is, if you're totally balanced and happy and just rejuvenated from your job, is that falling and benefiting your family? Or are you depleted and exhausted and overworked and not well and not healthy? And is your family feeling that as well? And are they getting shortchanged? Again, we go back to boundaries, right? How are you affected by your current reality? What is happening either in your body, your mind, or your emotions, whether it be health, whether it be energy levels, whether it be excitement, the ability to rejuvenate? Are you happy? Are others following your lead? If you're extremely happy from a very personal place. And you know what? Sometimes I lose people with these questions. I have to be very honest because they go to the root. And if we're really not ready to hear this, and we're on a webinar, right? So it's very impersonal, but at the same time, it's extremely safe. I have to say, after, my gosh, on Monday, I just turned 53, and I am excited and happy after 25 years of leading, and the only reason I've been able to do that is really doing this deep reflective work. Do you believe you have the power to change? And as I said earlier, are your core values guiding you, right? Why do you believe it's missing if your core values are not guiding you? And what can you do to incorporate that balance? And what is its importance in your life? And is your life right now in your leadership role completely sustainable? If it is, wonderful. You'll just breathe through the next section. But if it's not, and if it is, let's make it even stronger, looking at the areas starting from personal to your creative. I talked about that. Whatever your creative outlet is for yourself, to your family, your social, and professional. It should all be rejuvenating, a sustainable cycle of energy that you are able to take care of yourself, give time to your creative self, your family and friends, your social, your community, and then continue to redevelop your professional life. You should be able to have that in place, okay? We saw this already, right, James?
Yes, we did.
Yes. I don't know how that got back there. So we want to look at the personal and collective wellness, right? So when we talk about personal wellness, we also want to ensure that there is an initiative for everyone to be well, right? So we're focused on leading this initiative, the organization, the goals, whatever it is, we're leading, and hopefully we're getting goals from the team. But what is our role in seeking a more optimal, holistic, balanced state of health and well-being across multiple dimensions, right? Like the CEO of wellness.com talks about for leaders. How are we ensuring, not just for ourselves, because once you really begin to have the compassion for yourselves, You have compassion for others, particularly as a leader. And what is the compassion, right? That is ensuring that people don't suffer. They have less suffering and more joy. So we want that for ourselves, right? So we also, as leaders, have to figure out a way to incorporate that for those that we're leading. We don't want, not just the people we're serving, but those on our team. How do we ensure there's less suffering and more happiness? The same thing we want for ourselves. Great leaders blend courage with compassion, not just at home, but work also. Yeah. So a mindful leader, right, with the same compassion for yourself, understands, not just for yourself, but also others, the power you have, the more careful and responsive you must be with those you have the privilege of leading, serving, including yourself. Now, with this slide, I typically have like a field of daisies that are so delicate. And there's this big, tall leader walking through. And just how delicate the leader has to walk through because of all the power that it has. Now, if your organization is going through a change where that power dynamic is shifting and we're really not doing this top down, we're really in making sure there are pathways and access for everyone, particularly those in the value-based settings, to contribute to the goal setting, then you have, you know, different opportunities at stake. But if you're really recognizing at this moment how much power leaders have, you incorporate that observation, that reflection, and become definitely more mindful. The personal sustainability and rebooting areas, our innovative solutions here for practice, self-love. Basically taking time alone, practicing self-forgiveness, setting healthy boundaries, living intentionally, and doing what you enjoy. A lot of times people say, oh my God, you know, I'm just focused on running the organization. I can't, you know, running a 25-year organization, there was 10 years in, I nearly kaputzed. I mean, I was like really drained because there was no balance. I wasn't creating healthy boundaries. I was so driven and so believing, like passionate, like many of us in the culture and arts feel. It's what we believe in so deeply. How do we ensure that the healthy boundaries and living intentionally, and we don't stop doing what we enjoy in addition to the work we enjoy? Being mindful, awake. You know, sometimes we just go through. We sit in meetings, we might pick up a phone, we might be thinking of the next thing. We're not really fully present, as we spoke about before. Awake and aware is what I like to say, through reflection, stillness, and authentically naming our truth, which gives our team members, actually, believe it or not, permission to name their truth in a non-threatening and sometimes appreciative inquiry way, where even if it's not pleasant what we hear for ourselves, we created the learning environment. Core ideology, your reason for being, why and how you do what you do. Are you incorporating your core values? Do you know them? They're usually 5 or less. They're not aspirational. They are things that you have been doing that your friends, community, and family can say, oh my gosh, so-and-so is so authentic. It's not a vision. It's not where you want to go. The core value, your core ideology is built on what you do, and it is not time bound. It's something that doesn't go away. Compassion, kind and loving to oneself and others, the desire for others to have no suffering and to have abundant joy and happiness, not just for yourself, but for your team. And the big one is authenticity. People want to follow folks that they trust. and who are truthful and honest. And our team knows when we're not being truthful and honest. And how can we ensure that that is a part of the culture that we are building, or that we are informing, or that we are, better yet, contributing to? Because everyone should have access to contribute to the culture of the organization. And then the last, all of this takes courage, the willingness to experiment with new behaviors and take action. The best, and I quote the word best, leaders are courageously compassionate with themselves and others, right? So this is a little questionnaire from Mind Tools that we can use to really reflect on and look at. It's not going to be graded, but the article is, the URL is there, and I know James will put it up, and you can probably even snap a picture of it and go and take the assessment. Since this is a webinar, I'm not in front of you, we could do it online. And it's a good assessment to just quickly and simply look at yourself as a leader, and what you're doing, and how you're doing, and how what impact it's having on you. So I'll read through it really quickly. I can recognize my emotions as I experience them, right? Can I get out in front of them, or are they like dragging me down the street on a leash, right? And you have the opportunity at the top to say, not at all, rarely, sometimes, often, very often. If you don't even do the survey, you can, and it's anonymous, it's for yourself. I don't have anything to do with this, no connection to this, and I'm not advocating it. It's just a really simple, great tool. I ask people for feedback on what I do well and how I can improve. So the feedback piece, giving feedback, how about as a leader getting feedback and then following that feedback up with, how do you think I can improve? Be very specific with that language and ensure that the first question, how, you recognize your emotions as you're experiencing them, as you're hearing this information, is coming across. Remember, we talked about emotional intelligence. So really being present in yourself to know what you're giving off as people are telling you something that may not be as welcomed as you would have liked. Right? As a leader, you have to know. So that means we have to be in touch with our emotional intelligence and be able to get that feedback and create accessible opportunities. I find it difficult to read others' emotions, right? That's going back to emotional intelligence. I lose my temper when I feel frustrated. People have told me that I'm a good listener. That's one part we didn't get to spend a lot of time on, but there are very specific ways that we can gain listening skills. And I know how to calm myself down when I'm feeling anxious or upset. I enjoy organizing groups. I find it hard to focus on something over the long term. Transformational, visionary leaders have to have focus on a long-term goal. They have to see somewhere there everyone's going. It has to be a stretch goal, right? That you're not going to get there tomorrow. That's the role of leaders. Remember, we talked about knowing your role. And I'm going to skip over a couple because we went over that. And I avoid conflict and negotiations. That's a big one for leaders because other folks, it's not just for managers, they're watching. And so through this whole process, I recommend having a state of gratitude, right, as leaders, because people give us the opportunity to lead them. It's a gift. It's not a right. And to inspire others it's a beautiful, beautiful gift of being present. And we want to ask ourselves, am I willing to serve, engage with great care and gratitude? And if we go through the leadership process like that, we do continue to recognize that we walk through the field of daisies, and we go through with some core elements of good judgment, integrity, and really building on our people skills. So we're finished, but I just wanted to leave this up for 5 seconds so that you could look at this. It's a happiness research. And, you know, again, people want to follow joyful people, not angry, tired, worn out, broke down folks, right? So we have to find a way to rejuvenate and spend that time alone and think about ways of being happy. I always show this, and it gets a couple of smiles in different places. 6 or 7 hours per day of socializing that leads to the highest level of happiness. 10 is the number of friends it takes to give your well-being a boost. 5 is the number of, and this is not in any way like a rule. It's just some fun research that's out there. The number of positive interactions happy couples have for every negative one. 75,000 is the annual salary it takes to put a smile on the average person's face. Sometimes it's 35. 2 or 3, and remember that when you're leading your team, right? And they're talking about salary. 2 or 3 is the number of, well, we're going to leave out the romps. Number 1, the distance in miles to keep close friends within. I didn't edit this. I just always put it up, and hopefully you're smiling on your own. They say the happiest ages are 35, 55, and the 70s. I know what those have in common, but it would be nice for you to kind of talk about that with your friends and see how you could bring those happy moments into your current age. They've all been called the happiest age in various studies. And 40 is the approximate percentage of your happiness that is truly up to you. Do we believe that or not, right? And so what I do believe is that it is up to us, and we're the ones that we've been waiting for. And it does start with us as leaders. We have to constantly have this ability to reflect, rejuvenate, and focus on replenishing, rebooting ourselves, and ensuring that we are constantly giving off great energy. So that's it. That's my presentation. And I thank everyone, and I'm opening it up for questions and discussion. Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone.
Sure. Thank you, Kwayera. I have one that came in earlier just to get us started because I think it might be a nice summary of what was just presented. Kwayera, what do you think the best way or strategy for a leader to prioritize the 4 areas mentioned when there are a lot of issues occurring within the organization?
Okay. And the 4 areas are my 4 areas of reflection. I'll just repeat it for everyone. Observation, managing change, and problem solving. That's 1. And the last one would be sustainability and rebooting, self-sustainability. I would always say the last one is what you prioritize first. And I did it last because I wanted it to be the part that stuck with you the most. Self-care, managing sustainability for oneself, and having a system, technique, and tools to reboot your life, your energy, your happiness, your joy, your career, your excitement is hands down number 1. I would say after you do that, right, you really can move into observation. I think once you have a very strong sense of who you are and what you need and what your boundaries are and what your core values are that are guiding and leading your life, you can observe from a very different place, right? And I think that would have to be second, but it doesn't make sense oftentimes when I have clients, even in very big organizations, that go in and observe and they're completely depleted. They are not happy. They're not balanced. They're not enjoying much of anything in life. They're just getting through the job and they're so driven. So you can't really do any of the others until you focus and carve out some time for self. If you have that together, then I would say go in to that process of observation And then that gives you the information to reflect. Oftentimes, some folks reflect without observing first, but then we're dealing with so much of our leadership confirmation bias. Our heads, our minds, our beings are kind of hardwired like that. We go after in conversation and everything to confirm what we already believe. So if we work really hard at unlayering and pulling back that confirmation bias, we, with a strong sense of self and well-being, we can really observe from a very clear place and begin to reflect. And then ultimately, you have the tools and the ability to engage the entire team to manage change. I wouldn't take on managing change until the other pieces are in place, because it's not participatory. And again, it becomes, like Frank said, a very top-down reality. So that's my response to that question.
Great. Thank you so much, Kwayera. Before I read anything else in the chat, just want to make sure everyone who's here has the opportunity to share their thoughts. Maybe I can pose a question to you and the group, Kwayera. This came in earlier. Does anyone who's in middle management struggle to affect the culture of an organization? I have influence over my staff to inspire, but struggle to have my leaders inspire or affect the culture of those higher up on the org chart.
Right. I'd love to hear some other comments if anyone has any. And you let me know if you're seeing anything, and I could kind of chime in.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Martha. Yeah, we sure can.
Oh, good. I've lost the screen and I can't do chat. So for some reason my feed was not good. I guess the question that I have is really about the being inspirational piece. It seems like we're all so embedded in work and, looking around and saying, good job, on to the next thing. And how, as the leader, besides just working hard along with everyone else, maybe you can talk some more about those pieces being inspirational.
Okay. James, can you, some of it chimed out. Can you just repeat some of that for me so I'm sure?
Sure. Martha was saying, how can we be inspirational when sometimes those around us may not be that inspirational themselves, but how do we maintain that, and how do we effectively move through our work serving that purpose?
Well, okay. So I thought I heard, when she was speaking, I also thought of something else, but I'll answer what you just reiterated first, James. So there's the first part I heard about how can you be inspirational sometimes when those around us are not even inspirational, or I think that's what I heard. And then also when you have so many things to do, I think I heard that, and don't just go around and say, good job, because that's not inspirational, right? And so I keep going back to all the time, actually, to our core values. Like, what makes us really happy? What makes our heartbeat, our blood flow? What I say that all the time. What makes us really present and joyful in our own lives beyond the task of the work? I think for me, leadership is beyond only where you're going. It's oftentimes who you are as a person, right? And I'm not just saying to be charismatic, to not just give shallow feedback or just a tap on the shoulder, but really being able to manifest in yourself a joy or a belief of where you're going. I like a strong belief, like it's so powerful that where you're going is rejuvenating you, that people begin to see that. Literally, let me see, I had written something here, Martha. I'm trying to read my own writing, but I think it's really ensuring that you're able to allocate time. Just allocating the time to be able to impact those as inspiration, like to ensure. I can't speak to folks who are not inspirational in the organization or in your environment, but you being inspirational just starts from you really creating healthy boundaries, really believing that your values match the values of the organization, or intersect somewhere that is doable for you. And that begins to just exude. It doesn't become, for me, something that you specifically have to do. It's just by being, you become inspirational. I did have something else to say, but if Martha can give me a little feedback, if I'm off track, I might be able to clarify a little more. I just couldn't hear you very, very well.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, okay. No, that was good. It's true that you have to be who you are. You have to be authentic. And what I meant really was that we're all so busy in how to authentically be inspirational for those around you.
Exactly.
In it, even though I might be the leader, we're all in it together, and how to play that role. And what you said about exuding, that you can't fake that.
Right. You actually just reminded me. Thank you for. I knew if you said something, it would jog my memory. So what a leader can really do is prioritize for everyone, right? Being inspirational is also being able to make the tough decisions, right? To be able to say what comes off the plate. We have to be able to bite that, I want to say bullet, that's kind of a negative, right? But we have to be able as leaders to really say, this is not sustainable at all. So something has to, but for us to do these other things really great, we have to take something or some things off the plate. And that can be inspirational in and of itself, because you're allocating more time for things that probably matter more. Maybe it's not on the level of eliminating just burdensome systems. Maybe it is a project. Maybe it is an event. Maybe it's an activity, a task. Maybe it is a burdensome system. Maybe it's a program, literally. But whatever it is, the leader, not necessarily managers, but the leader with collective input and collective goal setting should have enough information to be able to say, we're going to prioritize here, and I've gotten enough information after observation, reflection, and we're going to do some change management. And we're going to take these things off the table, pause them for a year or so, but we're going to do this because I can't even do it. And I'm leading. There's no way I can be inspirational because, like you said, Margaret, you got to be, or Martha, sorry, my glasses. You have to be authentic. So that's what I wanted to say, is being able to prioritize, courageous enough to take things off the table.
Kwayera, thank you again for leading us through this amazing reflection and giving us some tools to move forward in our work. And to all of you who joined us today, thank you. And the slides and the recording,
thank you so much, everyone.
Out later today. And please keep an eye out for the post-event survey. Kwayera, do you have any final words for us?
No, I just had a really lovely time. I would love to hear from you. You can always follow me on Instagram, Kwayera AC. And I give out helpful points for leadership on a regular basis. So I hope you have a joyful, joyful week and weekend. And thank you to James and the National Guild for facilitating this.